as I welcome my guest into the studio, a family law specialist for Tyndall Gask Bentley Lawyers, Jane Miller. How are you, Jane?
Hi, Belinda. Well, thank you.
Good to see you. Now, we always think of this time of year as being quite a festive time, a time for family, but sadly it can also be a time where people announce their separations. Can you tell us about that?
Absolutely. So at this time of year, we see separations occurring which might have been delayed from earlier in the year if perhaps a couple had had a Year 12 student sitting exams this year, or even a Year 11 student. So we will see now some more separations leading into Christmas, but I think we'll also see people delaying separation in order to get through the festive period and then perhaps look at separation early in the new year.
So this is your busiest time. You're heading into your busiest time of year.
Absolutely. For those clients seeking advice for the first time, yes, it's a very busy time of year. And it's also a busy time for those clients that have separated before now, but haven't yet worked out what's going to happen with the children on Christmas Day or what will happen with the children over the school holiday period. So those people need a lot of assistance in order to negotiate or even possibly ask the court to make a decision for them.
How many people come to see you asking for guidance and advice before they actually decide whether they want to pursue separation?
We actually see quite a few, which I think surprises people about the job that we do. But many people, if they're thinking of a separation or they're thinking that they might be on the receiving end of a separation, they'll go and get legal advice without their spouse or partner knowing about it. So obviously we have to be discreet when that happens.
Of course. And why is that important?
It's really important because when separation happens for people, it's obviously a highly emotive time. People can't think clearly. And at that stage, it actually helps to have a little bit of preparation in hand so that you know whether you want to be the one that wants to leave the home, whether you want to dig your heels in and stay in the home. If you are leaving, what things are you going to take with you? What documents might you take? What will you do with the family photographs? What parenting arrangements will you put in place in the short term? And then there's whole ramifications about people's incomes and expenses. What will happen to the joint bank account? Who's going to pay the mortgage? They're the kind of things people really need to think about in advance if they've got the opportunity.
And childcare arrangements, as you mentioned. When you've got children involved, I would imagine it's a whole different ballgame.
Yes, it is. And they actually say the statistics are that 1 in 4 Australian children will experience a parental separation before they're 18. So there's a huge number of children out there that are experiencing parent splitting, and it does bring a whole number of ramifications on board, particularly with younger children where the children can't voice a view about what will happen and they're relying on mum and dad to ideally sort it out between them.
Can you give us an example of worst case scenarios whereby if people don't come and get advice, what could happen?
Well, one scenario that's coming to mind is I had a client once that was concerned his wife would abscond with the child at the point of separation and go overseas.
Right.
And she came from a country in South America, and had she taken off with the child, our prospects of ever recovering the child were going to be very low. And in that situation, what we actually did is we made an application to the court preventing the child from being allowed to leave Australia without his wife even knowing that he had done that. And at that time they were still, I wouldn't say happily married, but to her knowledge they were still married, and so he had to do that without her getting wind of it to stop her absconding. So that was a situation where it was highly imperative he got that advice in advance. At other ends of the spectrum, it's just important for people to know whether they're allowed to stay in the home or not, or whether they're going to be forced out of the home, and know their legal rights about that, because sometimes those decisions made in the heat of the moment at separation can actually have ramifications for what property they'll each receive down the track as part of their property settlement.
What's the law surrounding separations in terms of, my understanding of it is if you've been in a de facto relationship, if you've lived under the same roof, is it, for a number of years, then you are entitled to half the property, is that right? That's
right. So the definition of de facto relationship is that you've lived together for 2 years or more in a marriage-like relationship, or you could live together for less than 2 years if you have a child of that relationship. So once you jump over that hurdle and you qualify for that definition, then if the relationship ends, the de facto partners are entitled to a property settlement against each other exactly the same as a married couple. Not necessarily 50% each, because the court will look into who's brought what into the relationship, what the contributions have been, and the court will also look at the future needs of the parties. One might have, the primary care of a young child and can't go back into the workforce straight away, and so they might need an adjustment for that.
Yes, and I was going to ask you about this because many of my girlfriends that have spoken about this in the past, that if they give up work for a number of years, become the stay-at-home mother, which many of them want to do that, but they're concerned that should a separation or a divorce ensue in the years to come, then where will they be left? They would have lost their skills, they would have lost their career prospects.
That's right. Sometimes the most valuable asset you can keep at separation is an earning capacity. And if you are the person that's taken time out the workforce to raise young children, your capacity to earn might be considerably less than your spouse. And that means if your spouse goes off, after separation with a full-time job, nice and secure, earning a good income, that spouse is going to recover from the separation much quicker.
Exactly. And so is there recourse that the other party can take?
Yes, there is. There's a few things. That the most common one is when they have their property settlement, the court will award a greater percentage to the person that's taken time out the workforce to account for that. So they get a capital injection. The court also has the power to order what's called spousal maintenance in some situations. In America, they call that alimony. Completely different.
Alimony, yeah.
Completely different to child support. That's the concept that perhaps the spouse with a higher income should actually be contributing towards the living costs of the person with a lower income until perhaps they retrain or they get back to the workforce after having kids.
I should say at this point, if you've got any questions for Jane Miller, 8223 0000, you can get some expert advice. Jane's a family law specialist with Tyndall Gask Bentley at Light Square in the city. Tell us the story of the Cross Lotto winner.
Yes, so one thing that people often don't realise when they split is that even amicable separations do need some legal structures put in place to make sure that the agreement they reach is binding. And there is a very famous case that's been reported by the name of Farmer and Bramley, where the couple separated. They didn't really have a lot of assets at the time. They had an informal agreement about who was going to keep what. They never went and saw a lawyer to get advice to formalise their agreement. And then about a year and a half later, the husband of the relationship won a Cross Lotto Division 1 prize, almost $2 million. The parties had both moved on in their lives and remarried, and they thought that the affairs between them were in the past, but in that situation the wife actually made an application through the family courts and asked for a property settlement, including the husband's lottery win. And in that case the court did certainly award her a substantial sum, not quite half, but hundreds of thousands of dollars were awarded to her.
Post the conclusion of their union?
Yes, they had divorced, they'd remarried, and he won this lotto win years after. Absolutely, and the same principle applies if people perhaps have some sort of inheritance or a windfall or a personal injury payout, or even if they might be the one that keeps the matrimonial home. They buy the ex out and all of a sudden the real estate prices improve and there's more money available for a split. So those people really should have ideally get the formal structures in place so it's a final and binding agreement, all by consent and all still amicable, but it just means that no one comes back for a second bite of the cherry.
Yeah, that's just so important. We're talking the laws surrounding separation and divorce with family law specialist Jane Miller from Tyndall Gask Bentley. We're talking separations and divorces this afternoon. Apparently this is the time when family law specialists are rushed off their feet. People often wait, or couples often wait, until after year 11, year 12 exams to announce their split. Some wait until after Christmas to leave. Now, Jane, I wanted to know what percentage in your experience of separations are amicable versus those that are quite nasty?
I think we would probably say that most are amicable in terms of people being able to at least reach an agreement about their children's matters or reach an agreement about their property settlement. They might not want to be each other's best friends and, spend Christmas Day together, but, most people can deal with it without needing court intervention or only minimal intervention from their lawyers. Some people have no success at all in negotiating out of court, so they issue proceedings in court, and once matters do start in court, the court processes really put a lot of pressure on people to be reasonable and try and reach an agreement. The court gives a lot of support to that process with an event called a conciliation conference, which is a little bit like mediation.
Yes.
So once matters are in court, only about 5% actually need to go to a trial to be determined by the court. Most of the matters can be agreed between the parties during that court process.
Is there a rule of thumb when it comes to sharing custody or taking sole custody, or where do you start with that?
Some people understand that it's a shared care arrangement and that everyone's entitled to 50%, or there's a presumption 50%. That's not the case at all. The only presumption is that the court has to look at the child's best interests, and there's a number of factors the court will consider. In most cases, it's obviously in the child's best interest to continue a meaningful relationship with both mum and dad after the split, and in most cases that's supported by the child either living primarily with one and spending, a number of nights a fortnight in the care of the other, or it might be a shared care arrangement. Not as common, though, as people would think.
And does the court lend more weight to the mum or more weight to the dad, or it's really on a case-by-case basis?
I think the court probably rules in favour of mums more often, but that's more a result of, on the case-by-case basis,
Sure.
the mums having had more of a role as the carer during the relationship. But you do see dads getting custody of children, and you even see from time to time grandparents being awarded the care of the children as well.
I hadn't thought of that, of course.
But not always, in every situation, mum and dad aren't always really available or best suited. They might have substance dependency issues, they might have mental health issues, and so sometimes the extended family steps in.
Now, we were talking off air about who tends to fare worse out of a separation and divorce, and there's some new research that's come out.
That's right. There's been some research produced this year showing that for middle-aged women are generally the ones hardest hit financially from a separation, especially if they haven't repartnered. If they do repartner, it tends not to have such an effect. But that's coming back to that principle of who's got the primary earning capacity, and once again that if you're the person that has the more successful career and have a better income, well then you're going to recover a lot quicker. So there's almost this sort of band of generally women that are in that age bracket that might not be able to afford to ever buy a home, or might be dependent on the pension rather than being self-funded in retirement, whereas if the relationship had continued, they may have actually had a much higher standard of living.
I guess, when you go into marriage, you hope that it will last, but I think the statistics still are about 50% of marriages end in divorce. So I guess your advice would be to get advice.
That's right, exactly. Being well informed is always the best start, so that you don't make any decisions that prejudice you in the process. But absolutely, and I think the other important thing to recognise is that de facto relationships are definitely on the increase. Apparently about 11% of Australians are living in a de facto relationship.
Is that right? Yeah.
Some of those are same-sex relationships. And that number is definitely on the increase, particularly for people that are sort of in their mid to late 20s, early 30s, and most of them then go on to marry. So it's almost like the new engagement.
Yes.
And we see in our office a number of those relationships that fall apart before the marriage date, and they might have bought property together. And
but the law still recognises them as a quasi-married couple, even same-sex.
Yes, that's right.
De facto couples.
Yes,
right.
so I think that's not always well known. That's right. Same-sex de facto couples, if they separate, are treated exactly the same as a married couple when it comes to entitlements like property settlement.
So have you had people come in on their own without their spouse's knowledge, saying, "I think I'm going to separate. Let me just get get my ducks in a line. What do I need to know? And then you've never seen them again. They've obviously worked things out. You've seen that.
Absolutely. So everyone that comes to see us for that advice before they've separated, you know, not everyone wants to actually leave the relationship. Most of them want to still give it a good shot. No one really wants to go through a divorce unnecessarily. So most people I see really try really hard to make their marriages and their relationships work. And
what's the time frame between separation and divorce?
Well, the law says that you can't get divorced until you've been separated for 12 months. Some of those 12 months might be while you're living in the same house, but effectively separated, might be in separate rooms and have different lives. But for most people, it takes them quite a few years to actually get around to getting the divorce, and that's normally about 3 years, and from separation till the time they get around to file the paperwork. And sometimes that's an expense thing. There's a filing fee at the court. Sometimes it's just no one really sort of puts it high on the priority list. It's just a bit of paper.
They go and live different lives.
Yeah.
How many people are living separate lives in the same house?
It's very frequent. Really frequent, and often it'll be someone you know, but you don't know that they're effectively living separate lives. And some people live like that in separate bedrooms for years on end.
For the sake of the children, or just because I guess it's too expensive to go and buy another house.
Absolutely, and some people can live quite happily under the same roof, sort of living separate lives. So, but yeah, I think the financial consideration is a really important one, and especially, excuse me, as we're seeing now that houses are taking so much longer to sell, that they might have the property on the market and they're all stuck in limbo because they can't sell it and therefore split the funds.
Jane Miller, thank you so much for all your advice today. We'll get you in the studio again, and there's so many more issues that we need to look at, but we've run out of time. So you're from Tyndall Gask Bentley in Light Square.
Lovely. Thanks, Belinda.
Good to see you. Thank you.